Hello, I'd like to welcome all of our participants to the webinar for grants and funding and tips for applications. Today, this webinar is sponsored by the Regional Studies Association, which is a global and interdisciplinary network for urban and regional research and policy. And the RSA puts together these webinars to support their members with the latest kinds of research and funding schemes and opportunities for networking and publishing to help young researchers grow their careers. And as a response to the global crisis, currently the RSA has decided to put together this series of webinars as an initiative to support its members, but also the wider community. The professional webinar development series is one of the series. This webinar is part of this series, which offers different sessions on academic publishing and kinds of networking skills. But there are other types of series that the RSA also puts on, including the Regional Cities Industry webinar series, which is a monthly one by experts in the field of regional studies and science and planning. And you can find all of these details on the RSA website, and there will also be, they also have a new app which will be soon published so that it's easier to follow some of these updates. Just so that everyone knows, this webinar will be recorded and put on the RSA website. We will now begin the presentation with Ron, who I'll introduce in 1 second. And then afterwards, we will have a brief period, about 10 minutes, of question and answer. And in order to ask your questions, please use the Q&A function on the Zoom, which is a bottom button on your Zoom, not the chat. Please direct questions to me and I will ask Ron your questions. So with no more ado, I will now introduce Ron Boschma, who is a professor of regional economics at the Department of Human Geography and Spatial Planning at Utrecht University. And he has published and is an expert on, in many different fields, including the spatial evolution of industries, regional systems of innovation, the structure and the evolution of networks, etc. But he also has a lot of experience obtaining funding, which is this knowledge that he'll be sharing today. So I think I can now give the floor to Ron, and then afterwards we'll proceed with the rest of the questions. Ron, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. I'm really happy to be part of this webinar, and indeed, as Anne-Marie already said, I would like to share some own experiences with applications for research grants, and maybe give you some tips that might help in making your proposal application successful. Okay, I think I first have to share my screen. And of course, welcome everybody to this webinar. As I said, I will say something on the application process and how to, what are the caveats when writing a research proposal. I think what is crucial is that it all starts with a good idea, right? So you need to have a good idea before you start an application yourself. It might be an idea you have been thinking about already for a very long time. That's even better, right? Because it means you're highly motivated to do that and to implement it. Of course, it should be a novel idea, but that is also feasible to implement, that you already have ideas yourself how to do that. And of course, when writing the proposal, the idea will get better and will improve. But I think before you start, you already have to have a pretty good idea that is already well developed. Then, of course, it is very important to find the right goal for that. As we all know, there are many goals nowadays for which you can apply. There are all different types of funding schemes that are offered. Those might be about individual research projects, but also collaborative research projects, which also, the last thing, also adds much more complexity to the whole research proposal. Try to find the right goal which fits your idea, right? So when thinking about this good idea that you have, look carefully which goal would be the most appropriate one, which one would be the one that you would have the highest chance to be successful and get the grant, right? Of course, you also have to read the requirements of each goal, how much research experience is needed. Of course, when you have too little experience, it does not make sense to apply, because you would compete with many senior, many experienced researchers. So make sure that you find the right goal to apply to. As we all know, most goals are extremely competitive. So it's even more important nowadays to write an excellent proposal, because you compete with many others, and unfortunately, the success rate normally is pretty low in many funding schemes. Also make sure that you read the call text thoroughly, right? Because you will apply within that call. So follow their instructions closely. This is so important because many people start with an idea and then just write the proposal, and then forget about the number of criteria that should have been ticked when writing the proposal. So you have to really read well what the call is about, what are the main objectives of the call, and you have to respond to that. Important is to look at the evaluation criteria. So make sure you tick all the boxes when writing the proposal, and that you're able to do so, and that your good idea can indeed fulfill all those criteria. What I think is also essential, but that information might not always be available, is who will evaluate your proposal, right? Most of the time, external experts will be contacted and asked to assess proposals. What my experience is that in almost all cases, not really experts in your own field are assessing your proposal. So that also means that you have to write your proposal in a more broad manner. Don't think that they know all the jargon or all the complex concepts that you are referring to, but always explain them as if you're writing in front of a broad audience. I think that is extremely important. Don't think that you will be assessed by experts in your own field all the time. Another issue which is, I think, crucial is start early. Start as early as possible. We all know that to write a proposal is very time consuming. So do not, of course, start a few days before the deadline. Take your time. And my experience is there will always be delays in writing the proposals, because you think you have to go more into detail into the relevant literature, and you still lack a bit of knowledge on a particular field. So you have to go back to the literature and read that. So that might, of course, cause a delay. So you have to be aware of that. I think a good rule of thumb here is that you complete your proposal at least a few weeks before the deadline. So then you can relax and sit back and just in the last couple of weeks before the deadline of submission, you still have time to reflect, to edit the proposal, to rewrite parts where necessary. So I think this is indeed a very good rule of thumb. Also make sure that you involve others, right? These might be colleagues, and this involve others from the beginning of writing the proposal. So is the call the right one? Do they think you have the required expertise? So they can give you a sense of feedback at various stages. These might be colleagues and experts in your own field of research, but also a research support office. And many universities, many organizations have a support office that can really give very good feedback, because that is, let's say, their expertise. So how to make a budget, for example, very important. But also they're very knowledgeable about what is a good proposal and what is not a good proposal. So they can also give you very good feedback. Also because most of them are, well, almost all of them will not be expert in your own field. So they can come up with questions you have never thought about, which is important because, as I said before, reviewers can often be persons without your own field of research. So here you have a good check whether it is clear also to an audience that is not immediately familiar with your research topic. And then, of course, involve the administration of your organization, or administration of your university. You need their full support when applying, because when you're successful, of course, you have to make sure that you can actually carry it out, and that the organizations allow you to do so, and that, for example, you can get rid of some teaching time, things like that. So you have to organize yourself during the application process in that respect. And if possible, read winning applications from previous calls, right? Especially the call that you're applying. Try to get access to those winning applications, and you can learn a lot from those. All right. A few remarks about writing a grant proposal. As I said before, be very clear on your idea. And the novelty of the idea is pretty essential, right? You will only get a chance to of getting it funded when you can really specify very clearly what is the novelty of the idea. So you have to first summarize the state of the art in the literature on the topic that you're addressing, and then explain how you go beyond that state of the art. So be very specific in that. Don't make too general statements about that, but try to be as specific as possible. That always works. Make sure that your grant proposal also has very clear and realistic objectives. And so that you write down research questions that you can actually answer in the time frame that is available to you when carrying out a project. I think what always helps a lot, and what I think everybody recommends, is sell your idea in the abstract and in the opening paragraphs of the proposals. It's so important to impress the reviewers from the outset. So don't start with a very abstract and boring literature review, but get to the point immediately. Where do you want to contribute? What is your idea? And try to impress the reviewers already on the first page of your proposal, so that they are immediately into the topic and that they get highly motivated to read the rest of the application. Of course, show you are the expert and you know the field, right? So don't come up with an idea you have no expertise in yourself, of course. That I think makes sense, but still you see sometimes proposals that actually ignore this type of this dimension. What's important, as I said before, is to address the novelty of your idea, but never oversell in your proposal, right? Because reviewers will notice that. So if you say you have the expertise, well, that is not really the case in practice. They will notice. When you say, okay, I go beyond the state of the art, I make a new contribution to the literature. Well, it is not immediately clear and not immediately convincing. Do not oversell there. Make sure that if you say, I go beyond the state of the art, that you're very precise in what you actually mean, and what is the added value of your proposal, of your idea. Okay, the final slide that I would like to share with you, and I think then I, of course, also very good to have some discussions on this. Divide the work in clear parts in the grant proposal, right? Make sure that you identify different steps and that you specify those very clearly in the proposal. Be very clear on the data and methods, so that and that they are strongly linked to the research questions that you want to address, that you want to answer in the proposal. That is crucial. So explain which data you will use and why you use them, which method you are going to use and why that is the case, and that this will indeed provide answers to your research question. Accessible language, of course, that is probably one of the most important elements of writing a good proposal. It should be easy to read, and it should be to the point. Avoid abstract language. Avoid abstract theoretical reasoning. Make sure that it is very easy to read, again, and write it for a broad audience. Again, not necessarily expert will assess your proposal. So make sure that it is so easy to read and to understand. Be consistent throughout the proposal. That is very important, right? Especially the longer the proposal becomes, it might not always be consistent, the different parts of the proposal. So that is very important to check out in the end. Also make sure that there is a feasible and realistic work plan. Feasibility is always one of the main criteria on which proposals are assessed. Make sure that you have a realistic timetable, given the available resources, and that you are realistic about going from one research question to the other. What is the amount of time you will devote to that? Be very realistic in trying to assess that. Of course, make a clear and realistic budget, but of course experts can help you out, because we are normally not very good at that. And of course, each funding scheme also has different requirements in that respect, in terms of overhead you can include or not, and the amount of overhead costs, things like that. So that's very important. And last but not least, make explicit what kind of impact you will have. Not just on science, right? So what is your scientific contribution, but also to society at large. Well, almost all proposals nowadays should include a substantial part in the proposal on what kind of societal challenge are you addressing, or societal problem. And you have to be very specific on that, and how you're going to contribute that, and how that will be visible. To whom are you going to, because society at large, of course, is very broad. You have to be very specific what you mean by society, which are the stakeholders, which are the players that you're actually going to address, and that you might even involve in the whole research project. And then last but not least, dissemination, always a part of every proposal. How are you going to distribute the findings? Through what kind of channels? There might be many media through which you can share it, but you have to be very explicit in writing that down. Okay, I think those were just some thoughts about writing a grant proposal. In the end, it might still be a kind of lottery, right? So, because as I said, the programs nowadays are very competitive. So even while you might be among the 20% best, if they only will finance 5%, then it becomes a kind of lottery at that stage. But again, it's a prerequisite, it's a precondition to write the excellent proposal in order to get access to funding. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. And now we already have some questions, so I'll just go ahead and do one by one. The first question pertains to also the point that you just made about it being a competitive environment. And exactly that some of the person asks, well, some of the points that you lose or that you win actually may not even come down to research related issues, but might have part of the proposal, but to these other parts, which are like risk management or communication, etc. And what do you think of using a company, hiring a company that specializes in grant writing proposals to help you with that part, not necessarily the scientific part, but the sort of, let's say, communicating along all the other parts of the criteria? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think, first of all, I think a research support office can already mean a thing, right? Okay, so they are often part of a university, so they are not, let's say, commercial activities, but they can still give you very good advice how it works, right? Especially when those more standard proposals, like European proposals, right? They're like for Horizon 2020. They're very knowledgeable on that. They know exactly what is being asked for. Also because most of those proposals are very complex and very long, so they can already give you very good advice. But yes, if you have budget for it, you can hire a company, of course, consultants that is more familiar with writing proposals, especially maybe to the call that you're applying. I think there's also risk management was also mentioned, right? There can always be paragraphs in the proposal on what are potential risks, and that you specify those more in detail. I think that would be very good. Some grants ask explicitly for that you just mentioned, let's say, where are potential risks that could cause a delay. And then you have to specify, right? Okay, I think, if I get access to the data, I think it will take me 2 months' time to clean the data, but maybe in reality it will take you 4 or 5 months' time because you have now not really a lot of experience in dealing with those data. So you can specify that in the proposal, and I think that would be a very good sign, because you show that you are aware of that there are indeed risks, and that will only be a plus on your evaluation. So, not sure whether I fully answered, but.
Thank you. Now we also have a few questions that pertain to creating consortiums. So a lot of, as we know, a lot of funding entities are actually based on a consortium of researchers. So the questions pertain to two aspects. One is, how important is it to have a senior person as part of your consortium? Is it okay for a junior person to lead the consortium? Who should lead it? How to participate in it? And there's also a question about, what if you'd like to join one, and how do you get, as an early career researcher, kind of gain access to these consortium?
Okay. Yes, consortia, of course, they may consist of 8, 9, 10 partners, right? So they're pretty complex. So you need at least a very senior person that has a lot of experience in leading a consortia like that. What I do now and then is that I hire a private company. That I say, okay, you coordinate the whole thing, because it's your daily business. So we outsourced it to them, and they coordinate, and they know how to do that. They are extremely efficient, and that might already help a lot. I think you always need a senior, because coordinating a task like Horizon 2020 proposals I've been involved in, it's a lot of work. It's really demanding in terms of time and energy. So you need a senior person that knows all the caveats that might arise. You also have to make a decision. You have to make an agreement among all partners, right? Also about division of labor, division of financial resources. So that means that you need to be senior, you need to have a status to make that type of decision and that people accept what you're proposing. So that about the seniority. I think for an early career, how to become part of the consortia. Well, probably it might work through your senior researchers in your department, right? Most of them, they have huge networks in that respect, and sometimes they are even asked to become part of a consortium. And then, of course, for them, then it is absolutely crucial to involve early career researchers to make them involved in that respect. There are also events organized now and then. I know from the European Commission that there are days that you can go to Brussels, where you can get online access, and where you can actually meet other people that are interested to form a consortium on a particular theme. So there are different ways of doing this.
The next question is again about bidding for large projects like Horizon 2020, but this one is more about the research. So sometimes these calls are based around a theme. And what do you think is more important? Finding a niche, it's basically a question about being narrow, depth or breadth. So if you have a niche, should you go very much in depth to a question, or should you really cover the breadth of the theme, and how to balance those two aspects?
I think it's depending very much on the description of the theme, right? I think most themes are formulated in a very broad manner, right? And then it's about okay, what are the specific requirements? How are they developed? So sometimes they come with a long list of potential topics, right? So and of course those are more concrete, those are more detailed. So I would always connect to one of the questions mentioned in the theme, mentioned in the call. That of course will increase your chances to get it, because you can actually refer to it in an explicit manner in your proposal. So I think those you will have a higher chance to be successful. Of course, when you're doing consortia, I mean, it does not really make sense to go very much into one specific detail, because you can, of course, make a division of labor between partners, and each of them, of course, can go just cover a specific theme, and then you have different work packages that sum up, and then you get findings, overall findings for a more general theme. So within a consortia, you can of course go into detail, but then you're talking about the work package level, right? So most proposals, I think they have about 6 or 7 work packages, and each work package may focus on a particular sub-theme or within the overall theme. So and then it depends on which partner has most expertise, and then you make a distribution of sub-themes among the different partners.
Okay. Next, we have a very important question, which is what to do if your proposal is rejected.
Yes, and of course that happens all the time. It happens to me all the time. It can be very disappointing. It can be very frustrating. Of course, as soon as you get the message, you damn the whole world, and you blame everybody except yourself. And then you can of course blame the reviewers because they didn't understand anything and they were the wrong reviewers and things like that. But then you have to start rereading it, at least that's what I do, and then you become a bit more realistic, and then they might actually have very good points. So this happens all the time, right? So as I said, the success rate of each funding scheme is very, very low. So most of us, if not all of us, are not accepted. But don't worry, because it's part of the game. and it is, but you have acquired an invaluable experience, right? Because the next time you will be much better. You will improve. You will see what the reviewers had to say on your proposal. That some of the comments might be spot on, and they said, "Oh yes, they're absolutely right. I should have thought about that," or things like that. Or they might just they have not understood it. But that might also you to be blamed for that, right? That you did not really explain it that well. And let's be honest, I mean, we are all researchers, right? So even if your proposal has been turned down, it was very good working on a proposal for a very long time, and made it very concrete, because that will improve your research performance in the future for sure. So it's not just that if your proposal is turned down that it was a useless exercise. No, I don't think so. It's you have gained invaluable experience which you can use for a next proposal or another research project that you're already actually working on. It's writing a proposal, I think, is very good for developing very good and new ideas and make them very concrete. So that I think it's a good exercise.
I'll just let the participants know that we've come to the end of the half an hour, but there are still some more questions. So if you would like, we'll just carry on for 10, 15 minutes or so answering the questions. If it will be running over slightly. One of the questions, the next question that we have is about applying for funding in a country that is not your own. So for instance, if you're in the UK, you want to apply for funding from Germany, etc. And there's also someone who's interested in knowing, also for people, researchers who are based outside of Europe and in North America, where there are a lot of schemes, you know, how easy is it to be successful gaining those kinds of funding? And how do you go about venturing outside your own country to receive funding?
Right. Well, I'm not so much aware of many funding schemes that are available also for researchers outside their own country, right? So of course, National Research Council. I've applied now and then in the UK, but always in collaboration with partners, right? So they involve UK partners, then involve you in becoming part of their consortium, and then you are eligible, right? But of course, all national funding, all national research councils, they are very nationally oriented to the national researchers. I'm absolutely no idea whether researchers from the US or from any other part of the world can access consortia in the European Union. I think they do to some extent, but it depends very much on the call, right? So, I'm not so sure whether I have a lot to say on this particular topic.
Okay, I'll just ask another question about the amount of time that one should spend. So we know two things. We know that grant writing, that grants are competitive, and we know they take time. So how much is it worth it for an early career researcher to spend so much time on it? And beyond, of course, what you said about it being very good for development, but of all the other things that one can do, publish articles, go to a conference, you know, assuming the time is limited, is it really worth, how much is it really worth? And then the other thing is, and who should really, if you spend a lot of time, like who should pay for this time? I'm assuming this person, when they asked the question, they meant like, should you be able to work on your proposal? Suppose if you have a day job being a researcher for someone else, or how to manage, you know, the fact that the time spent should be committed to something else, basically.
Well, I mean, I think that if you work as a researcher, right, in an organization, in a university, it's part of your job, right? So you are supposed to apply for research funding, and if you're successful, it will also be used as a criteria for promotion. So anyway, so you have, if you are in that game, you have to play the game because those are the rules and the criteria that you're assessed in your own organization. I don't think that Of course, when you're successful in grant, even better. But of course, organizations are not stupid. They also know that it is a very competitive game, and that they cannot just take for granted that you will be successful in 1 or 2 years. If not, you will be out of business. No, I don't think that. But at least you have to show commitment. You have to do the applications, and even when you have a good evaluation criteria, but you don't get the money, it will be a very good thing on your CV. Organizations really assess that in a very positive way. So I've had many colleagues that just got excellent evaluations but didn't get the money, but still they can put that excellent evaluation on their CV to show, hey, I was pretty close. This was just bad luck that I didn't get it. So that will play a part in possible promotions within your organization. So actually, it's absolutely worth doing it, and it's probably a prerequisite to make promotion within universities. You have to show a track record at some point of time.
Okay. The next question is about dealing with reviewers. So the first part is, how do you anticipate who these reviewers will be? Especially if it's an interdisciplinary call, it's hard to know who is really going to be your reviewer, and how can you really imagine what they might think about it when you start writing. And the other part is dealing with reviews when you resubmit. So suppose you are applying to a scheme where you can resubmit after having received reviews, even if you've been rejected. And can you ask for different reviewers, or is it very important to really improve the aspects that they've suggested? Or what if you feel that some of their comments are really, not made from people who are experts in your field and aren't maybe not even on point? So how to deal with this idea of reviewers reviewing your work that's not necessarily experts in your field, but that are a little bit whether to accept or not.
Okay, you were 2 seconds away. I didn't hear your last words, but I got the question in general. Okay. We always say you have to be very lucky with reviewers, right? In that sense, I think submitting a proposal is a bit of a lottery in that respect. You can be very unlucky with reviewers. I mean, let's be honest about that. And that's beyond your control. Of course, you don't. In most application grants, you can specify whether you really don't want to be assessed by a particular reviewer. That's possible. It's possible to mention that name, but again, of course, you will never know who will be your reviewer because it's completely anonymous. So that's one thing. A second thing, yeah, if you have been turned down, and is it then should you resubmit? Okay, I have never heard that if you resubmit, you will get the same reviewers, right? This is maybe a bit different with journals, right? When you submit an article to a journal. When you say okay, I submit more or less the same article to it, well, okay, when you reject it, of course, you cannot send it to the same journal. So again, it's not the chance that you will get the same reviewers is pretty low. I think that also is true for applications. So of course you can resubmit, and I would of course strongly recommend you to resubmit when you're turned down, because if it was a good proposal, and still you only need to improve it on a number of ways, and reviewers maybe have also made very good suggestions to improve it, I would definitely go for that. But the chances will be extremely low that you will get the same reviewers. So you start all over again, and you might get other reviewers that will come up with other type of comments. But that's, again, also that's part of the game.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. The other question is, again, dealing with collaborative proposals. So what's the best way to organize when you're writing with a proposal with more than one person? So suppose it's not only up to you, but you are collaborating. What's the best way to write effectively, in your opinion?
Well, of course, make sure that you go for the right partners, right? So I guess that when you have an interest in joining a consortium, or you take the initiative, you have to approach partners that you really would like to work with, right? So that will be a huge opportunity if you get funding, that you can both work on a common project. So to me, it should always be kind of curiosity driven, right? So and with whom would you really like to collaborate? This is at least how I did it in the beginning of my career, that I wanted to connect to others and even stay abroad for a while and work together with colleagues that I admired. So that depends then on the type of expertise that they have, and so that you can really come up with a consortium that really makes sense in terms of complementarities in research and experience, and then you might also have a chance of getting the funding. So I think to do a collaborative research project is very recommendable. Because, well, you can of course go for an individual grant, but you learn more when you collaborate with others.
Okay, this is the last question that I'll ask, and it's given the current situation. So it's really important to be realistic about what you can do, but how can you be realistic with all the uncertainty that we have now with the pandemic? So for instance, where you'd like to go for your field work, or how much you can travel or go to conferences, the budget and the actual feasibility of what you're doing is sort of may be feasible in normal conditions, but may not be feasible with global pandemic, and how to incorporate that aspect into the application.
That's the question. that's a hard one. Of course, we know that funding organizations of course they are aware of it, right? They're fully aware of all the problems that we are faced now, and of course the uncertainty is the biggest problem, right? You cannot really plan before. When you have to do field work, for example, in another country than where you are based, that will, and especially when you go to developing countries where you have to be present and you have to be do field work for a longer period of time. That is of course hard to predict whether you can actually do this. I think you have to contact your the agency where you will apply for funding, and ask them how they're going to deal with this. Can you just submit a proposal as it was, as we pretend there is no corona, and then as soon as you get it and corona is still there, that you can adapt your proposal. So I think it's up to the strategy of a research council, of a funding agency, how to deal with this issue. I think what I see happening now is more that they're just postponing deadlines of proposals because people are so busy with other things to, for example, to get their online teaching right. So they do those postponements. But yes, you have if you're doing field work, for example, when you're not working with secondary data, primary data, then when you work with primary data, I think you should get in contact with those funding agencies and how they are going to deal with this. Also, how they will assess this type of proposals. So again, I don't have a full answer here, but I think you should just contact the funding agency. What is their policy in that respect?
Okay, well, that's the end of our webinar. I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and also Ron for taking the time to give his presentation and also answer all of our questions. This is, again, I'd like to remind everyone that this is part of a weekly series, and that you can join us again next week. And that if you need any other information, you can find it on the Regional Studies Association website. And thank you to all, and I wish you a good day.